Come, yet again come.
Good morning. I'm Vera Love. Yes, come, whoever you are, and welcome to you all. Richard is lighting the candle as we invite you to our spiritual community of hope, courage, and compassion. Now, take a deep breath and release it as we ready our hearts and minds to enter this precious space together. In today's homily, our guest speaker, Reverend Terry Cummings, will talk about Mary Oliver. Poems by Mary Oliver are shared so frequently during Sunday morning services that one might think of her as our poet laureate. Like Georgia O'Keeffe's paintings of flowers, Oliver wove spiritual and sensual images into her work that are not obvious at the first reading. Please open your hearts and minds as we reflect on her life and her contributions to liberal religious faith through her poetry and prose. Richard will read a Mary Oliver poem to honor Armistice Day and for all those who pray for peace.
Wage peace, Mary Oliver. Wage peace with your breath. Breathe in firemen and rubble. Breathe out whole buildings and flocks of red-winged blackbirds. Breathe in terrorists and breathe out sleeping children and freshly mown lawn. Breathe in confusion and breathe out maple trees. Breathe in the fallen and breathe out lifelong friendships intact. Wage peace with your listening. Hear sirens, pray loud. Remember your tools, flower seeds, clothespins, clean rivers. Make soup, play music. Learn the word thank you in 3 languages. Learn to knit and make a hat. Think of chaos as dancing raspberries. Imagine grief as the out-breath of beauty or the gesture of fish. Swim for the other side. Wage peace. Never has the world seemed so fresh and precious. Have a cup of tea and rejoice. Act as if armistice has already arrived. Don't wait another minute. By Mary Oliver. We're very fortunate to have Reverend Terry Cummings with us today to talk about Mary Oliver as poet or prophet or maybe both. Reverend Terry Cummings earned her Master of Divinity degree from Union Theological Seminary in New York City in May 2016. During her second year as a Master of Divinity student at Union, she fulfilled the degree's field education by serving as the student minister of Central Unitarian Church in Paramus, New Jersey. During 2017 to 2018, she served as ministerial intern at the First Parish Church in Lincoln, Massachusetts. Reverend Terry was ordained jointly by the Central Unitarian Church of Paramus, New Jersey, and by the UU congregation at Montclair, New Jersey. In 2018, she subsequently served congregations as interim minister in Arizona, Pennsylvania, and Connecticut. UU ministry is Terry's second career. Prior to entering the ministry, she was a partner in a general practice law firm in New York. Terry earned her Bachelor of Law degree from the London School of Economics and Political Science and has practiced law in New York State from 1982 to present. Reverend Cummings, thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. And listening to that, I'm just realizing how old I really am. I go down to the shore in the morning, and depending on the hour, the waves are rolling in or moving out. And I say, oh, I am miserable. What should I do? And the sea says in its lovely voice, excuse me, I have work to do. Thus begins 1,000 mornings, a book of poems that personifies the grace and the holy in nature that is central to Mary Oliver's poetic art. I fell in love with Mary Oliver's poems about 15 years ago, around the time I found a spiritual home in Unitarian Universalism. About a dozen of Mary's books have pride of place in my bookcase, next to my books of Rumi. Mary Oliver and Rumi were staples in the Sunday services of the UU congregation I attended in New Jersey. They might have been the unofficial UU poet laureates, the epitome of what it means to be spiritual, but not religious. Although Mary Oliver attended an Episcopal church, she was almost certainly sympathetic to most, if not all, of the 7 principles that are near and dear to many of our hearts. 3 of her poems are readings in the UU Grey Hymnal, and she read several of her poems for the annual Ware Lecture at the UUA General Assembly in 2006. Mary's spiritual path included books by Ralph Waldo Emerson and his contemporaries. Emerson, for those who don't know who he was a 19th century Unitarian minister who was one of the leading lights of the Transcendentalist movement. The first of the 7 UU principles that were adopted back in 1985 to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person has echoes of Emerson and the Transcendentalist movement, and Mary, I'm sure, would have been aware of that. Our 7th principle, to affirm and promote the interdependent web of existence of which we all are a part, also would have been near and dear to Mary. She would have been sympathetic to that from her readings of Emerson and his contemporaries, including Henry David Thoreau of Walden Pond fame. Mary's poetry asks questions. What are we called to do with our lives? Where is God? Her questions are consistent with our UU principle for a responsible search for truth and meaning. Mary's appreciation for the fine print of nature that is only visible to the devoted and patient observer is reflected in so many of her poems. She admonishes us to pay attention, closely observing the natural world, everything from the spiders who lived on her staircase to the shellfish she gathered from the seashore. That was the embodiment of her spiritual life. Writing poems for me, she once wrote, is a way of offering praise to the world. Mary was asked about her spiritual background in an interview by Krista Tippett on NPR's On Being in 2015. When I was a child, she said, I was sent to Sunday school, as many kids are, and then I had trouble with the resurrection, so I would not join the church. But I was still probably more interested than many of the kids who did enter the church. It's been one of the most important interests of my life and continues to be. It doesn't have to be Christianity. I'm very much taken with the poet Rumi, who is Muslim, a Sufi poet, and I read him every day. All of her life, Mary disliked being inside buildings, and she sought refuge in the outdoors. As a child, she often played truant from school. In one of her books, Blue Pastures, she describes how she went into the woods and read Walt Whitman. down by the creek or in the wide pastures I could still find on the other side of the deep woods, I spent my time with my friend, my brother, my uncle, my best teacher. She wrote about Whitman's influence on her writing in a couple of her books. So Mary Oliver was born just outside of Cleveland, Ohio in 1935. Her father, Edward, was a public school teacher, and her mother, Helen, was a librarian. In searching the internet, I found that her father had died in 1975 and her mother 10 years later. And I also discovered from reading her father's obituary, I should say, that Mary had a sister named Joan. That's all I was able to find out, though. Joan seems to have fallen into the depths of history without any ripples. Mary Oliver lived a very private life. She didn't say much about her family or her childhood, but when she was in her late 70s, in an interview by Maria Shriver for the Oprah television show, she revealed publicly for the first time that she had been sexually abused by her father. Later in her interview with Krista Tippett, Mary shared that she had a very bad childhood for everybody, every member of the household, not just myself, I think, and I escaped it barely with years of trouble. But I did find the entire world in looking for something. I got saved by poetry, and I got saved by the beauty of the world. In her book, Dreamwork, published in 1986, there is a poem entitled Rage. You are the dark song of the morning, serious and slow. You shave, you dress, you descend the stairs in your public clothes and drive away. You become the wise and powerful one who makes all the days possible in the world. But you are also the red song in the night, stumbling through the house to the child's bed, to the damp rose of her body, leaving you a bitter taste. And forever those nights snarl the delicate machinery of the days. In another poem in the same book, A Visitor, Mary wrote, my father, for example, who was young once and blue-eyed, returns on the darkest of nights to the porch and knocks wildly at the door. And if I answer, I must be prepared for his waxy face, for his lower lip swollen with bitterness. And so for a long time I did not answer, but slept fitfully between the hours of rapping. But finally, there came the night when I rose out of my sheets and stumbled down the hall. The door fell open, and I knew I was saved and could bear him, pathetic and hollow, with even the least of his dreams frozen inside him and the meanness gone. And I greeted him and asked him into the house and lit the lamp and looked into his blank eyes, in which at last I saw what a child must love. I saw what love might have done had we loved in time. One can scarcely imagine what scars Mary carried from her childhood and what her life would have been had she not had the need to escape as soon as possible from what she later called her interrupted childhood. Mary left home the day after she graduated high school. She was 17. She went to the home where the poet Edna St. Vincent Millay had lived in upstate New York. She got to know Millay's sister, Nancy, and the two women spent the next several years organizing Millay's personal papers. In the beginning, I was so young and such a stranger to myself, I hardly existed, she wrote at the beginning of her memoir, Upstream. I had to go out into the world and see it and hear it and react to it before I knew at all who I was, what I wanted to be. On one of her later visits to the Millay home, Mary fell in love at first sight with the photographer Molly Malone Cook. I took one look and fell, hook and tumble, Mary shared later in Our World, a book of Molly's photographs. While Mary's body of work focuses on nature and the natural world, Mary's poems and essays leave little doubt that she believed in the supernatural God. For Mary, everything is connected, and we are literally living in the body of God. Trees and stones, the sea, all have souls that are connected to each other. In one of her later poems, she told the story of Jesus' entry into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. But she told the story through the eyes of the donkey on which he rode, without even mentioning Jesus by name. After Molly's death in 2005, Mary's poems contain more Christian and more biblical references than earlier volumes of her work. Perhaps this reflected her 20-year spiritual relationship with Thomas Shore, who was the Episcopalian Archbishop of Massachusetts. In her book, Thirst, published in 2007, not long after Molly had died, Mary wrote a poem called "The Vast Ocean Begins Just Outside Our Church, the Eucharist. Something has happened to the bread and the wine. They have been blessed. What now? The body leans forward to receive the gift from the priest's hand. Then the chalice. They are something else now from what they were before this began. I want to see Jesus, maybe in the clouds or on the shore, just walking. Beautiful man, and clearly someone else besides. On the hard days, I ask myself if I ever will see him. Also, there are times my body whispers to me that I have. Mary's poems and essays reveal very little, if anything, about her sexual orientation. She was not the out lesbian feminist that her contemporaries, Adrienne Rich and Audre Lorde, were. But nevertheless, there are hints here and there that Mary was a sexual being. In a poem entitled The Gardens, which appeared in the summer 1981 issue of the Georgia Review magazine, she wrote, in part, this is an excerpt, "Where are you? I called and hurried out over the silky sea of the night, across the good garden of branches, leaves, water, down into the garden of fire. The skin you wear so neatly, in which you settle so brightly on the summer grass, how shall I know it? You gleam as you lie back, breathing like something taken from the water, a sea creature, except for your two human legs which tremble and open into the dark country I keep dreaming of. How shall I touch you unless it is everywhere?" At first blush, Wild Geese, which is perhaps Mary's most famous poem, is an artistic image of, well, wild geese. That's what I thought it was all about when I first read Wild Geese. But I found some writers online who insist that Wild Geese reflects Mary's sexual orientation. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. About 20 years ago, during a visit to Santa Fe, I bought some posters of Georgia O'Keeffe's flower paintings and had them framed. They adorn the walls of my bedroom. They greet me every morning when I wake. Georgia O'Keeffe is known for her studies of flowers in bloom, as if the artist were looking at them through a magnifying glass. Beginning in the 1920s, the critics, who were mostly male, I should mention, claimed that O'Keeffe's flower paintings were of female body parts. Georgia O'Keeffe spent 60 years vigorously denying that that was the case, but that perception continues to this day. And I wonder if the same is true for Mary Oliver's poems, that they can sometimes be read as sensual or not, depending on the lens through which they are read, gay or straight, male or female. In her interview with Krista Tippett in 2015, Mary talked about Wild Geese and said matter-of-factly that it was simply written as an exercise in technique with one of her students in a poetry class. She made no mention of the poem having a deeper sexual or spiritual meaning. In 2014, Mary wrote a very touching poem about her encounter with lung cancer and her mortality. The poem is called The Fourth Sign of the Zodiac, which is the sign of Cancer. Why should I have been surprised? Hunters walk the forest without a sound. The hunter strapped to his rifle, the fox on his feet of silk, the serpent on his empire of muscles, all move in a stillness, hungry, careful, intent, just as the cancer entered the forest of my body without a sound. The question is, what will it be like after the last day? Will I float into the sky, or will I fray within the earth or a river, remembering nothing? How desperate I would be if I couldn't remember the sun rising, if I couldn't remember trees, rivers, if I couldn't even remember, beloved, your beloved name. But for Mary, death is a reason to be optimistic. For her, it's merely a transformation, a reabsorption back into the body of God. In Long Afternoon at the Edge of Little Sister Pond, she wrote, "Every day I walk into the world to be dazzled, then to be reflective. It suffices, it is all comfort along with human love, dog love, water love, little serpent love, sunburst love, or love for that smallest of birds flying among the scarlet flowers. There's hardly time to think about stopping and lying down at last to the long afterlife, to the tenderness yet to come, when time will brim over the singular pond and become forever, and we will pretend to melt away into the leaves. As for death, I can't wait to be the hummingbird. Can you?" Was Mary Oliver a poet or a prophet? I think she may have been both. Her poetry to me is prophetic in the way she portrayed the natural world as a spiritual embodiment of a supernatural being that people might call God. One of her last books, Redbird, reflects Mary's sadness that the natural world that she worshipped is in the process of being destroyed, to the detriment of all, and for her, to the detriment of the God in which all things dwell. I hope that despite the direction in which Unitarian Universalism has taken in the last few years, Mary Oliver's poetry and prose will continue to inspire future generations of UUs. Recently, I read a criticism of her work online. The critic said that Mary is preoccupied with her private thoughts and feelings, that she rarely wrote about urban or suburban life or other human beings. This person wrote, and I quote, "Oliver worship represents a holding on to individualism and self-absorption that is currently being challenged by 21st century proponents of a far stronger community ethos in the UU denomination." In other words, Mary hasn't drunk the Kool-Aid. Perhaps Mary Oliver, like the Seven Principles, will be forgotten before too long. She died in January of 2019 from lung cancer in Florida, where she moved to spend the last years of her life. I'll leave the last word to her. If I have any lasting worth, it will be because I have tried to make people remember what the earth is meant to look like. That she did, that she did. Blessed be, amen, may it be so, and thank you.
many thanks, Terry, for your messages today and your information from an in-depth study about Mary Oliver.
Thank you.
And we have a few minutes now, folks, for folks to ask you a question. If you have a question, use that button on the bottom, reactions, and in that reactions icon is a raise your hand flag. If you'll do that, then I can recognize you and go. We can do it that way. And I promise to do my best to do that. One question, while this is queuing up, I have, Terry, is in your study of Mary and her works, what do you think she believed as far as the afterlife? And did she, and you quoted her about the hummingbird. Did she believe in reincarnation, or what do you think?
I don't think she believed in reincarnation. I also think she was too much of a realist to believe in a heaven or hell. I don't think she really did believe in an afterlife, but I think she did feel that somehow her atoms and molecules would live on in something else. And in writing about the death of Molly, she reflects on how Molly is still present in something else that is still alive. So for her, it was really a biological continuation. And I think in a sense, she really did believe she would come back. Her body parts would be part of a hummingbird or a squirrel or a clam. And to me, that's very beautiful. It's kind of, it is reason for optimism that when I die, I mean, I'll be 70 years old next year. I'm probably one of the youngest members of this group. But I was thinking about my mortality, and it's very comforting to think that along the lines that she has, that somehow or other I'll be alive in somebody else, and that's good.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Terry, this is just commentary. I'm a psychologist, I'm a therapist, and I owe a debt to Mary Oliver. I regularly say to people, what will you do with your wild and precious life? It's just the most beautiful question that I've ever found.
Yeah. And now that I'm not serving a congregation and starting to accept the reality that I may not serve another one, I'm asking myself that question every day. What the heck am I going to do now? Too old to work, but too young to retire. And that's a predicament a lot of people in my generation find themselves in, I think. Yeah, thank you for that.
Hi, Terry. When your predicament you just described about being sort of too young to retire, but oh my God, what comes next? Do you have any observations or thoughts, or even if they're not fully formed, about how you will go about deciding what might happen next? Are you just open to whatever comes, or what?
Well, this morning's service is kind of what happens next. I had a very difficult encounter with the UUA. Mm-hmm. They accused me of bullying in a church that was just a horribly dysfunctional congregation, and they removed me from fellowship, mm-hmm. despite the fact that the church themselves wanted to keep me as their minister, and that there was so much in support of me. So I'm in a place where I'm very disillusioned with the UUA for a whole bunch of reasons. I mean, I've never been treated so unkindly. Mm-hmm. In practicing law for almost 40 years, I've encountered all sorts of, use my word, shit in courts and from adversaries and all sorts of things. But I've never encountered something so just cold-hearted and dysfunctional and wrong as unjust as the UUA. I've experienced injustice in all sorts of court cases that I've litigated, but the UUA, I've never really seen anything like it. So I'm at a place where I have a very strong call, but I don't want anything to do with the folks in Boston. So what my choice has been to try and forge a ministry that is liberal, religious, caring, and compassionate, independently of them. And I do some pulpit supply from time to time, and I'm still in touch with some of the members of the congregations I've served who are going through life changes and end of life issues. So right now I'm just finding it easy to keep busy and taking what life sends me. And I don't know where I'll be a year from now, but I'll still be doing some kind of ministry, I'm pretty sure.
Terry, we know quite a lot about the kind of pain you've been in. You may know that Kate Rhodey was interim, the church that we left.
Yeah.
And as all of this began developing 3 or 4 years ago, just at the time that Todd Eckloff published his book, I got acquainted with Todd, and so we've been in connection and in league with Todd and Umiak and all of that that's come along, and it was sad news to me that you two were so badly harmed and unfairly treated. But
Yeah.
Thank you.
sorry.
So Todd and I have struck up a really good collegial friendship, and I consider him a very supportive friend. And I am spending time with the NAUA. I write a column every month, and I'm cautiously optimistic that will get some traction and find a new path for many UUs away from the extremism that's just taken hold at 24 Farnsworth Street.
We are now collectively a member of NAUA,
Yeah, our fellowship.
which no one should try to pronounce.
NAUA. I have a career suggestion for you. So I think I could listen to you read the phone book, as they say. I love your delivery. It's beautiful. And so I think you should check in with, I don't know, Amazon or whoever and read books, that you can buy on.
Maybe audiobooks of Mary Oliver.
Right.
Okay, take it or leave it. That's just my advice. So.
Thank you for that suggestion. I'll take it under advisement.
Well, we surely don't have the budget for you, but you're welcome with us anytime.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thanks so much.
that was lovely. Okay, Richard.
Well, I think we have another point to end the service, if I'm not mistaken. So let's see. Yep.
One day you finally knew what you had to do and began, though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice, though the whole house began to tremble and you felt the old tug at your ankles. Mend my life, each voice cried, but you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do, though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations, though their melancholy was terrible. It was already late enough, and a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save.
Thank you to everyone for being present today, and a special thanks to Reverend Terry Cummings. Spread love and kindness as you step back into the world today. Remember, the world needs you. We need you. Go in peace.
Well, thank you all for attending today. Again, a special thanks, Terry. It's been wonderful working with you. And we are at the time where we'll do our love ritual and send you off if you must go. But we would also love for you to stay around for Joys and Concerns if you can. All right. If you got to go, go. We send you with love, our little love signs and hugs and kisses until we see you next. And the rest of you stick around for Joys and Concerns, and I'll try to do as good of a job as Joe does.